Hey, to get started with Valorant, I'm going to assume that you've downloaded the game and Vanguard and now are sitting on the main menu. The very first thing I want you to do is to go over onto play and press practice. Go onto the range and it should load. You can pick from any agent, doesn't really matter, and now we can do our settings. So at this point we want to press escape and do our settings. So audio settings is all preference aside from we need to make sure we have stereo on and we have HRTF on. Next is voice chat, and for voice chat you just want to make sure that you have your input device selected, have a decent incoming volume. Just kind of treat this as time goes on. If everything works, you can use your loopback test to kind of hear yourself hello 1 2 3, and then you can do party voice chat if you want it. If you have a teammate to play the duo with to play with, then that's good. Make sure you have team voice chat on. And then for the voiceover stuff, I would make sure you have it on, to be honest, because there are things that people won't call out, and the agents themselves will call it out when they're like spot an enemy and that kind of stuff. So it can be quite useful to have this stuff on. Okay, so now for the video settings, we're going to start with the general display settings, and I recommend full screen or windowed full screen. I prefer full screen. Resolution wise, there's not really much you need to think about here aside from just do what you prefer, but make sure you have the highest selected hertz available, so the highest of hertz your monitor can do. So make sure on system settings you have that all set up correctly so that you can actually use the highest hertz you have. Next is the limited FPS stuff. Generally, I don't limit my FPS only on menus, but you can limit your FPS if you need to. Okay, so finally we have NVIDIA Reflex low latency, and I have this on. You can have on plus boost. For me personally, like on my machine, it was stuttering, but it can be like PC to PC basis, so just test it on yours to see if you get stutters or not. And you only ever have this off if you're having really bad FPS issues. It probably won't help a whole lot, but it does cost a tiny bit of performance, so you can turn it off in those sort of situations, but for the most part I would just recommend it to be on. Next is graphics quality, and the two main things you want to look at are multi-threaded rendering. You basically always want this on, and VSync you always want this off. Everything else is personal preference. For instance, the experimental sharpening is one that I prefer to have on, and I'm pretty sure I might be in the minority there, where I think a lot of people prefer to have it off. Next is stats, and I'll just talk about the main three things you need here. I haven't used the presets before, so they could be good, they could be bad, I have no clue. Client FPS is the one that you need. Don't worry about that one, it's completely useless to be honest. Network RTT is also known as ping, and that's the second one you need, so network RTT and client FPS. And then the third one you need is shooting error on graph only. So graph only shooting error, text only on network RTT. You can have graph on if you want, you can have both. And client FPS, you can also have both, but I would recommend having text for sure on those two. The one that I also have here is packet loss. I would recommend this one if you have dodgy internet or something. I have it on graph only because I used to have not great internet, so I sort of kept it on, basically. Coming back to the shooting error, this is a really important graph because it will really help you learn how to move around and when to shoot and that kind of stuff. Next is general settings, and the enemy highlight color will be either red or yellow. Those are the two that I recommend, but purple's fine if you have gotten used to it in another game or something, or if it is just the color you see the best out of these three. But yeah, I would generally recommend red or yellow. Next is sense, and this is once again a preference, and I think a lot of people get hooked on sense too much, like what the best sensitivity is or whatever, because it doesn't really exist. There's probably like a best sensitivity for you, and maybe there's like a best sensitivity technically, like mathematically, but for the most part we're all different, and it's a lot easier to just try and find something that works for you and stick to it than it is to try and like work out what the best sensitivity is, because there's no definitive answer realistically for anyone. So I'd recommend the range between 0.3 and 0.4 and the DPI at 800, and that's what I would recommend for now until you kind of get a feel for maybe you want a lower sense than that, maybe you want a higher sense than that, but I would recommend that range for now. Raw input buffer is on. I also recommend for the map that as long as you can copy these settings, I would recommend copying the settings on screen now, but you generally just want to make sure that the map is completely visible at all times. You don't have to have fixed on if you don't want to have fixed on. But yeah, for the most part, I would just recommend the map is fully visible at all times. Going all the way down to other, the first person handedness is just whatever you prefer. I think a lot of people prefer right overall. I prefer left. There's also always show inventory, which I prefer on, but you can have it off. And then there's also show corpses, which I prefer off, but you can have on. You can also have blood on or off. I prefer it off because I can see the yellow sparks better than I can see the blood personally. But I think a lot of people don't share that sentiment. I prefer blood, so I'd recommend keeping blood on because I'm pretty sure it's on by default. Next is controls, and there isn't much to say here other than try and make things as comfortable as possible for you. So for instance, in the abilities here, I actually have some of mine swapped around, and the reason for that is because I prefer my movement abilities on C, and a lot of them end up on E by default. So I like to swap mine around. You can also see I have an agent profile here with Raze, and Raze has satchels, the blast pack here, and this is usually binded to Q, and I don't like that, so I bind it to C because it's my movement ability. Just to clarify, that isn't necessary, it's just what made things more comfortable for me, and it's just an example of how you can make things more comfortable for you. Something else I quickly want to bring up as well in the equipment and interface tab here is that I have this red exclamation mark on both of them, and it says I have conflicting bindings, and I do have conflicting bindings, but in the context of the game and why I play, I never put my scoreboard up at the same time as scoping in. So these bindings never actually conflict with each other in the game. And thankfully the game does let me just have these conflicting bindings. It doesn't actually like force me to change them around. Because I don't need to, right? I'm never actually running into a situation where I'm using these and they're doing both of their functions at once, right? I'm doing one or the other, usually with the mother mouse. This is also a nice little segue to the sniper rifle aim into hold and not toggle, because I think it just makes you a bit snappier with the operator and things, so I would recommend that. It's just overall I think it makes the gun a bit easier to use as well, so I'd recommend it. So finally, it's the communication hotkeys, and I recommend you have team voice push to talk binded. Not on mouse like me, but I would have it binded somewhere on your keyboard. The reason for not on mouse is because it may interfere with your aim if you're not used to it. So I would just recommend putting it on your keyboard somewhere. Okay, now we're doing controls. We're going to move on to crosshair. And basically this is all preference with what you want. I prefer this cross. I also really like John QT's crosshair. I use this one the most right now. And I've used the cross for like 4.5 years. So I would recommend you get used to crosshairs rather than changing them up a lot. Obviously you can like change whatever you want. But life has been a lot easier with these presets and being able to like share codes and import and export stuff. So I would just go find crosshairs you like online and then import them into the game. That's probably the best way to do this rather than making them yourself. You can make them yourself when you're more well versed with like this menu and stuff and just played around with it if you want to, but I would just go find crosshairs you like and use them. One more thing for the crosshair, I would make sure that this white dot on the sniper rifle is visible as you can. Obviously I wouldn't have it too big, but I would make sure that you can definitely see it. The reason why is, as you can see on this crosshair, right, you can see my white dot, but if I move it disappears, but then I stop and it appears again. So it's actually quite nice to have this on your scoped weapons, so make sure you can definitely see this dot. Once all that's done, I'd recommend then just like fine-tuning things in the range and just kind of getting used to stuff. So press the practice button, you can shoot the bots, or you can use the start key here. Before that, I would recommend pressing F3 and just quickly making sure that the speed is on easy. You can also do eliminate 50 or 100, but I recommend easy, and then have bot armor off with infinite ammo on, and then just try and shoot the bots. And after you feel confident in your settings, I would recommend starting in Team Deathmatch or Deathmatch just to get a feel for fighting in the game for like a couple of games. And then we're going to mention some mechanics that are really useful to be aware of because they can really help you have a bit more of a frictionless time when first learning the game. And those mechanics are dead zoning and jump spotting. These may not be things that you need straight away when you first start playing, but they do definitely help and they're also very good to be aware of so that you can learn towards them. Dead zoning refers to the dead zone in your accuracy when you're moving. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the range and my shooting arrow graph to show this. So just watch out for the shooting arrow graph and just see if you can see anything interesting. Okay, you can see there that the blue represents inaccuracy and the yellow represents accuracy. And I actually got accuracy when changing directions. This is known as the dead zone. You may have also seen this be called counter strafing, but counter strafing is a bit different to this. Counter strafing refers to the speed of the accuracy during your movement, whereas dead zoning refers to the accuracy during your movement. Counter strafing doesn't tend to be used because the speed of you slowing down tends to be quite fast, so you tend to not get that much from counter strafing versus not counter strafing. So going back to our graph, this is why it's very important to put this on. We want to just try and minimize the amount of blue we see on our graph. When you're trying to successfully dead zone, only use the left and right keys, as it makes it a lot easier for you as the player to successfully do it. This is for two reasons. The first reason is that you only are pressing one directional key, and if you're pressing multiple ones, it makes it harder for you to stop still completely when you actually want to shoot. The second reason is if you're pressing forwards or backwards, it makes you look slower on the enemy's screen, and it's therefore easier for them to shoot you. Next we'll talk about jump spotting, and jump spotting is a mechanic in the game that's quite useful, but the main reason why we want to be using it is just to get used to the movement mechanics in the game. It looks a bit like this, where you'll jump in the air and then strafe back behind cover. It just gives you a bit of info into what you actually want to do when you actually peek that corner. You won't be doing this all the time, but it is something that is very helpful to know how to do, and as I've said, it helps you get used to the movement of Valorant. It is important to know that we do not have to perfect these things, or even come close, we just have to be aware that they exist and improve them over time. Next, start with Unrated. Unrated is very similar to Ranked, and is basically your taster to see if you like the game or not. It's important to pick up on the basics of Valorant through this game mode. There are two teams known as attackers or T side and defenders or CT side. The spike, also known as the bomb, needs to be planted by attackers, and the plant needs to be prevented by defenders. Once the bomb is planted, the defenders have 45 seconds to defuse, flipping the attack and defense dynamic. The first team to 13 round wins win the game. After 12 rounds, the team swap sides. If the game ends up at 12-12, you will play overtime until one team wins. In Unrated, this means the first to 13 as normal. In Ranked, it is different, but we won't talk about that yet. Before this, you'll start in Agent Select. You can pick whatever agent you think looks fun. I recommend Phoenix or Brimstone if you don't know what you want to play. Don't worry about picking roles for now, because you'll learn what the roles do as you play. At this point, the main things you'll want to learn are Agent Utility and Basic Economy. There's also be a bunch of basic game knowledge you'll pick up over time. Things like smokes, flashes and movement abilities, how they work, and not only how your agent may use them, but how they work when playing against or with them. Maybe you'll see some fun agent niches that you enjoy, and you'll go on to play them later on down the line. Next, we'll talk about the economy, and the economy does look daunting, but it can be fairly simple. Players earn money from kills and from rounds ending, and the attacking team gets money for planting the spike. Winning a round gives 3,000 credits, and losing gives 1,900 credits. However, on a losing streak, you gain an additional 500 credits losing bonus, up to 2,900 credits, to help the losing team keep up. If you lose a round and live, you only gain 1,000 credits. These are important things to know about, but they aren't super important to the actual way you'll play the game. You can kind of go without actually learning the things I've just talked about, at least until you make it to Ranked. So instead, I'm going to talk about the economic processes in the first 3 rounds of the half. These 3 rounds are known as Pistol, Second Round Buy, and the bonus for the winning team, but Pistol, Second Round Save, and First Buy round for the losing team. These should be important rounds that you should know about, and more importantly, how to spend your money on these rounds. The pistol is locked to 800 credits for everyone, so only pistols are available, as well as limited utility. The second round buy is where the winning team will buy SMGs, cheaper rifles or shotguns, and the losing team will buy very little, some utility or maybe a sheriff or two. The third round is the bonus. This round is where the winning team will most likely have cheaper guns left over from the last round, and instead of wasting that money by throwing them away, you end up using the cheaper guns to try and deal economic damage to the enemy, as they will be committing a lot of money on this round. This is because the losing team will be committing to a full buy. This means full armor, full utility, and either a Vandal or a Phantom. This is a basic overview of the first 3 rounds. There are plenty of ways that these rounds can be played that may not align with my explanation, but for now this should suffice. I want to round things off by making sure you're focusing on the 2 most important things: improvement and of course having fun. It is a game after all. Winning will never be more important than these 2 things. I hope you enjoy your time with Valorant. If you want any more help, tips and tricks, I have a Discord where I coach for free, and I also have hundreds of videos to help new players improve at this game. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and have fun, and I'll see you in my next one.